The wind howled across the barren hill, carrying the scent of damp earth and wilted flowers. I trudged up the path to the cemetery, my boots sinking into the mud, each step heavier than the last. 3 years had passed since James, my husband, the company commander, died in a border skirmish. 3 years of grieving, of raising our son alone, of clinging to the memory of a man I thought I knew. Today, I came to his grave to lay down fresh chrysanthemums, to whisper apologies for our fights, for the love I'd sometimes doubted. But as I reached the weathered tombstone, my breath caught, and the bouquet slipped from my hands. Another was etched in cold granite beside James's name, Lisa Chen. The letters were fresh, carefully carved as if they belonged together. My knees buckled and I sank to the ground, the mud soaking through my worn skirt. Lisa. The name burned in my mind. A ghost from our past, a woman who'd served alongside James in the army. I'd heard whispers of her, seen her once or twice during his rare leaves, her city polish and soft voice a stark contrast to my calloused hands and rural drawl. But this, her name on his grave? It was a violation, a theft of the life I'd poured into him. Mom, why are you crying? My son Wei stood behind me, his 16-year-old frame lanky and awkward, his eyes narrowed with something sharper than grief, resentment. I wiped my face, struggling to find words. Wei, what is this? Why is her name here? My voice trembled, betraying the rage simmering beneath. He scoffed, kicking a pebble into the grass. Aunt Lisa belongs there. Dad loved her. They were together for decades in the army, side by side. She was his real partner, not you. His words sliced through me, each one a betrayal deeper than the last. You tore them apart, Mom. You and your nagging, your cheap clothes, your country ways. Dad defended the country his whole life. All he wanted was to rest next to her. Why can't you let him have that? I stared at him, my son, the boy I'd cradled through fevers, fed with scraps while saving every coin for James's letters from the front. I'd raised him with every ounce of my heart, yet here he stood, spitting venom, choosing a stranger over me. Wei, I whispered, do you know what I gave up for your father? For you? He turned away, his shoulders rigid. Aunt Lisa said you were selfish. She told you that Dad was trapped in a marriage he didn't want. I believe her. The world spun. Selfish? Trapped? I'd worked my fingers raw in the fields, cared for James's parents until they passed, begged neighbors for loans when his military pay never came. I'd sent every penny to the front, believing it kept him safe, never imagining it funded her Lisa, with her bell-bottom jeans and city laugh. And now my son, my flesh and blood, saw me as the villain in a love story I'd never been part of. I pressed my hands to the tombstone, the cold stone grounding me as tears blurred my vision. James, I murmured, was it all a lie? Every promise, every letter? My fingers traced the carved names, and a strange heat pulsed through them, like a heartbeat in the stone. The air thickened, the wind falling silent. A vision flooded my mind, flashes of my life, sewing by candlelight to save money, Wei's first steps, the hunger pangs I hid so he could eat, James's rare smiles when he came home, always shadowed by Lisa's presence. Then, darker images, my final days, sick and abandoned, pleading for a doctor while Wei scoffed, why waste the money, and James begged for a divorce to make it official with Lisa. The visions swirled, and a voice, not mine, not James's, whispered in my soul, you gave everything, but they took more. Will you let this be your end? The heat in my hands surged, spreading through my chest, my heart pounding as if waking from a long sleep. The cemetery faded, and I saw myself, younger, standing in our old Shanghai home, the day James brought Lisa for a visit. The voice spoke again. Choose now, Emily. Stay and fade or rise and reclaim your life. I gasped, my eyes snapping open. The grave was gone. I stood in our cramped living room, the familiar wooden floor creaking under my feet. The calendar on the wall read 1975, 7 years before James's death. I touched my face, smooth, unlined, the face of a woman in her 30s. My hands trembled, but not with fear. A fire kindled in my chest, fueled by the betrayal at the grave, the vision's truth, and the chance I'd been given. I was reborn, not by chance, but by a force that saw my worth when no one else did. Outside, I heard James's bicycle clatter against the wall, Lisa's laughter trailing behind. In my past life, I'd welcomed her, cooked her meals, and swallowed my doubts. This time I wouldn't. I walked to the kitchen table, my steps steady, and picked up a pen. The divorce petition would be my first act of defiance. Lisa's name on that tombstone had shattered my illusions. Now I'd build a life that was mine alone. The flickering oil lamp cast shadows across the kitchen, its weak glow barely reaching the chipped table where I sat, pen still in hand. The air was thick with the smell of boiled cabbage and the faint tang of rust from the leaking roof. James's laughter with Lisa echoed from the yard, a sound that once warmed me but now twisted like a knife. Moments ago, I'd been reborn, transported from the cold betrayal at James's grave to this moment in 1975, when he brought Lisa to our Shanghai home. The vision at the cemetery, my life's sacrifices laid bare, the cosmic voice offering a second chance, burned in my mind. I wasn't the same Emily who'd welcomed Lisa with a forced smile. Not anymore. In my past life, I'd given everything for James and our son, Wei. When we married, I was 20, a Northwest girl dazzled by James's gentle voice and soldier's uniform. I left my parents' farm, ignoring their warnings about his poverty, and followed him to Shanghai. We had nothing, no banquet, no photos, just a registry stamp and a promise. I stayed behind when he joined the army, believing my sacrifices would build our future. I cared for his aging parents, their ailments endless, their gratitude sparse. I raised Wei alone, stitching clothes by moonlight to save coins, skipping meals so he could eat rice instead of wild herbs. Every month I sent my factory wages to James at the front, my letters filled with love, his replies brief and cold. I never suspected those funds went to Lisa. She was his comrade, he'd said, a nurse who kept his spirits up. I pictured her bandaging wounds, not wearing the trendy jeans my money bought. For years I endured, believing James's distance was the war's fault, not his heart's. I begged neighbors for loans when the drought hit, their sneers cutting deeper than hunger. They'd say your man's a hero, but you're a fool to starve for him. Still, I sent the money, my faith in James unshaken, until the grave revealed the truth. My sacrifices had built their love, not ours. Wei grew up under my care, but his heart turned to his father and Lisa. As a boy, he'd cling to me, his small hands warm against my calloused ones. But by his teens, he saw me through James's eyes, a loud, ignorant countrywoman, unworthy of their refined world. "You'll never be as gentle as Aunt Lisa," he'd snap, his words sharper each year. "She speaks English, Mom. She's been to the city." What do you know? I'd swallow the hurt, thinking love would win him back. It never did. In my final days, sick and bedridden, I begged him to take me to a doctor. He scoffed, "It's not like you'll get better." Why waste the money? Dad and Aunt Lisa need it to travel. Even then, I forgave him, blaming myself for his coldness. Now, reborn, I saw it all. My sacrifices hadn't bound us as a family. They'd chained me to their disdain. The vision at the grave showed me James's letters, promises, and lies to keep my money flowing. Lisa's name on the tombstone wasn't just a betrayal, but a monument to my erasure. Wei's resentment wasn't childish rebellion. It was the fruit of James's stories, painting me as the obstacle to their doomed love. I'd given my youth, my health, my dreams, and they'd taken it all, leaving me with nothing but pain. The pen trembled in my hand, the divorce petition half written. I'd have torn it up in my past life, convinced myself to endure for Wei's sake. But the cosmic voice's question echoed, "Will you let this be your end?" No, I wouldn't. I wasn't just a wife or mother. I was Emily Zhao, a woman with fire in her bones who'd once dreamed of building roads in the Northwest, not begging for scraps in Shanghai. My country needed workers for the development program, and I'd answer that call. James and Wei might despise me, but I'd no longer live for their approval. Footsteps approached. James pushed open the door and Lisa trailed behind, her perfume sharp against the kitchen's stale air. "Emily, get supper started," he said, his tone clipped. "Lisa's hungry." In my past life, I'd have jumped to obey, hoping for a kind word. Now I looked at him, his broad shoulders, his commander's confidence, and saw only a man who'd stolen my life. Lisa smiled, her eyes flicking over my faded dress with pity. Wei peeked in, his gaze darting to her, already choosing her over me. I set the pen down, the petition hidden under a cloth. I'll start cooking, I said, my voice calm, masking the storm within. James nodded, oblivious, and led Lisa to the living room, their laughter resuming. But as I lit the stove, my resolve hardened. This was no longer my home. The Northwest waited, where my hands could build something lasting, not serve those who never saw my worth. Tonight I'd finish the petition, tomorrow I'd file it. The Emily they knew was gone, and the woman reborn would never look back. The morning sun barely pierced the smog over Shanghai, casting a dull glow through the kitchen window. I stood at the counter, chopping wilted cabbage, the knife's rhythm steady against the worn wooden board. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the distant hum of James's voice outside, talking to Lisa. Last night, reborn from the betrayal at James's grave, I'd begun my divorce petition, the words a quiet vow to reclaim my life. The vision of my past sacrifices, years of hunger, Way's scorn, James's lies, still burned in my chest, fueling a fire I'd never known. Today, I'd take my first real step toward freedom. James burst through the door, his military jacket slung over one shoulder, his face flushed with irritation. Lisa trailed behind, her city shoes clicking on the floor, her eyes scanning the cramped room with a faint grimace. James barked, "Emily, hurry up with those meat coupons," tossing his cap onto the table. "Lisa wants pork for supper. 2 pounds at least. It's her favorite." His tone carried the weight of a commander, expecting instant obedience. In my past life, those words would have crushed me. The meat coupons, our last for 3 years, were a lifeline, carefully rationed to feed Way and James's parents through lean months. I'd have pleaded, "We can't use them all now," only to face James's rage. He'd cursed me, taken my savings, and bought Lisa trendy bell-bottom jeans, leaving me to beg neighbors for rice while Way clung to my skirts, hungry. The shame of those door-to-door pleas, the neighbors' sneers, your hero's wife begging like a dog, had haunted me. I'd endured it, believing my sacrifice honored James's service. Now I knew better. I turned from the counter, meeting James's gaze. His eyes, once soft when we met in the Northwest fields, were hard, impatient. Lisa stood beside him, her hair neatly braided, and her smile was polite but cold. Way peeked from the doorway, his allegiance already shifting to her. The old Emily would have cowered, explained, and begged. But the woman reborn at the grave felt something new. A spark of defiance, sharp and bright. I reached into the cupboard, pulled out the faded envelope holding the coupons, and handed it to James without a word. "Here," I said, my voice steady, almost cold. "Buy whatever Lisa wants." Heavy but straightforward words hung in the air, a rejection of my role for years. James blinked, surprised, as if he'd expected a fight. Lisa's smile faltered, her fingers brushing James's arm, a subtle claim. Way frowned, confused by my lack of protest. I turned back to the cabbage, the knife moving faster now, each chop a silent declaration. I was done serving their whims. James stuffed the coupons into his pocket, muttering, "Good, we'll head to town then." He glanced at Lisa, his tone softening. "You'll love the market, Lisa. They've got everything." She nodded, her eyes flicking to me, assessing. In my past life, I'd have felt small under that gaze, my faded dress and rough hands no match for her city polish. Now, I felt only clarity. Let them spend the coupons and squander the savings. It wasn't my burden anymore. As they pedaled off on James's bicycle, Lisa's laughter floated back, and I slipped out the back door. The narrow alley behind our house smelled of coal and damp laundry, but to me, it was a path to freedom. I walked to the corner store, my steps quick, purposeful. The bell jingled as I entered, and old man Chen looked up from his ledger. "Emily, what brings you here? No groceries today?" I said, just a pen and paper, placing a few coins on the counter. He raised an eyebrow but handed me a cheap fountain pen and a stack of thin sheets. I sat on a stool by the window, the morning bustle of Shanghai fading as I began to write. "Petition for divorce," I scrawled at the top, the words bold against the page. Each sentence was a release. Irreconcilable differences, neglect of familial duties, abandonment of mutual trust. I wrote about James's absence and betrayal of Lisa, though I kept her name vague, knowing the party secretary wouldn't care about personal scandals. The act felt like shedding a heavy coat I'd worn too long. In my past life, I'd never dared imagine divorce. It was a word for city folk, not a factory worker like me, bound by duty to a soldier husband. I'd stayed through Way's tantrums, James's coldness, Lisa's shadow, believing endurance was love. But the vision at the grave had shown me the cost. My health, my dreams, my very self, erased for a family that despised me. The cosmic voice's challenge, "Will you let this be your end?" echoed in every pen stroke. No, I wouldn't. The Northwest Development Program needed workers, and I'd join them, building roads and futures, not begging for James's approval. I folded the petition, tucking it into my pocket. The store's clock ticked toward noon, and I knew James and Lisa would return soon, expecting supper. Let them cook their pork. I had a train to catch, a life to claim. As I stepped into the alley, the sun broke through the smog, warming my face. The spark of defiance flared into a flame. This was only the beginning. The alley buzzed with the clatter of bicycles and vendors' calls, but I moved through it like a ghost, the divorce petition a secret weight in my pocket. The morning's defiance, handing James the meat coupons without a fight, still thrummed in my veins, a pulse of rebellion born at his grave 3 years later. The vision of my past life, my sacrifices for a family that betrayed me, had stripped away my illusions. In 1975, I saw Lisa not as a fleeting guest, but as the shadow that had darkened my marriage. As I returned home, the sun climbed higher, its heat heavy on my shoulders, mirroring the truth I could no longer ignore. Lisa Chen wasn't just James's comrade, she was his confidant, a woman whose story intertwined with his long before I entered the picture. I'd pieced it together over the years, though I'd buried the knowledge deep. She was an educated city girl from Beijing, with dreams of a stage career, until a broken engagement left her adrift. Seeking purpose, she joined the army as a nurse, her charm and quick wit winning hearts in the barracks. James met her there, a young officer drawn to her polish, her English phrases, her laughter that echoed like chimes. She followed him through postings, her devotion unwavering even as he married me. I was the practical choice, a sturdy Northwest girl to manage his home, while Lisa was the dream he couldn't abandon. My money, sent faithfully to the front, hadn't bought bullets or boots. It had bought her jeans, perfumes, and a place at his side. I slipped through the back door, the kitchen still smelling of cabbage and coal. James and Lisa hadn't returned from town, but Wei sat at the table, carving a stick with a pocket knife, his brow furrowed. "Where were you, Mom?" he asked, his tone sharp, already tinged with the disdain I'd heard at the grave. "Dad said you're supposed to cook for Aunt Lisa." "I'll cook," I said, keeping my voice even. His eyes flicked to me, searching for weakness, but I turned to the stove, hiding the fire in my chest. In my past life, I'd have coaxed him with a smile, hoping to win his love. Now I saw him as he'd become, a boy who'd call me ignorant and choose Lisa over me. The cosmic voice from the grave echoed, "Will you let this be your end?" No. I wouldn't let their scorn define me. The door swung open and James strode in. Lisa was at his heels, her arms laden with packages. The scent of fresh pork wafted from a paper bundle, and her new bell-bottom jeans swished as she moved, the fabric catching the light. "Emily, you should have seen the market," James said, his voice bright, as if I were a servant to be humored. Lisa picked out the best cuts. "We'll have a feast tonight." Lisa set her packages down, her smile radiant but calculated, her eyes sliding over my faded apron with a flicker of pity. "They're beautiful, James," she said, holding up the jeans. "You shouldn't have spent so much." Her voice was soft, but the words were for me, a subtle boast of his devotion. Wei's face lit up and he rushed to her side. "Aunt Lisa, you look like a movie star. Mom could never wear those." His laughter cut deeper than the knife in his hand, but I kept my gaze on the stove, stirring the pot deliberately. I'd have snapped in my past life, demanding James explain why our savings went to her. He'd have shouted me down, and I'd have retreated, ashamed. Now, I let the moment pass, my silence a shield. Lisa's presence wasn't just a betrayal. It was a mirror, reflecting my erasure. She'd taken my husband, son, and dreams while I toiled to sustain them. But the vision had shown me another path, one where my hands built roads, not meals for those who despised me. "Emily, start the pork soon," James said, tossing the meat onto the counter. "And don't skimp on the spices. Lisa likes it flavorful." He didn't look at me, his attention fixed on her as they moved to the living room, Wei trailing like a puppy. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. The Northwest Development Program needed workers to transform barren lands into fields and carve paths through mountains. I'd once dreamed of such work before James's promises pulled me to Shanghai. Now, Reborn, I'd answer that call. I slipped upstairs to my room, the petition still in my pocket. Sitting on the creaking bed, I added a final line. I seek to serve my country, free from a marriage that binds me to neglect. The words were a vow not just to leave James, but reclaim the woman I'd been. A girl who'd climbed Northwest hills, dreaming of a life that mattered. Downstairs, Lisa's laughter rang out, mingled with Way's chatter. Let them feast on their pork, their jeans, their illusions. I tucked the petition into a cloth bag, alongside my few belongings. Tomorrow I'd file it with Secretary Carter. Tonight I'd pack for the Northwest. As I folded a worn sweater, Way appeared at the door, his knife now sheathed. Mom, Aunt Lisa says you're lazy. Are you? His question was challenging, but his eyes held a flicker of doubt. In my past life, I'd have pleaded, explaining my sacrifices. Now, I met his gaze. Think what you want, Way. But one day, you'll see who built this family. He blinked, unsettled, and turned away. I closed the door, the lock clicking with finality. Lisa's shadow might loom large, but I was stepping into the light. The dawn broke over Shanghai with a pale, hesitant light, filtering through the cracked window of my bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, the cloth bag at my feet, its contents meager but precious, a few clothes, my mother's old hairpin, and the divorce petition, its ink dry and resolute. Yesterday's defiance, handing James the meat coupons, writing those bold words, had solidified my path. The vision at the grave, revealing Lisa's hold over my family, had stripped away my illusions. Reborn in 1975, I was no longer the Emily who begged for love. Today, I'd file the petition and secure my ticket to the Northwest, where my hands would build a future, not serve those who scorned me. I slipped downstairs, the house still asleep, the air heavy with last night's pork scent. James and Lisa had feasted late, their laughter grating as I'd packed in silence. Way had joined them, his voice bright with admiration for Lisa, each word reminding him of his betrayal at the grave. I'd have lingered in my past life, hoping for a scrap of their affection. Now I moved past the dirty dishes, my steps light, my heart unburdened. The petition in my pocket was a key, unlocking a door I'd never dared open. The walk to the party office was brisk, and the morning streets were alive with vendors and cyclists. Secretary Carter's office, a squat building with peeling paint, stood at the edge of town. I knocked, my pulse steady despite the weight of what I carried. Carter, a wiry man with kind eyes, looked up from his desk, papers strewn around him. He said, Comrade Zhao, early as always, gesturing to a chair. What brings you? I slid the petition across the desk, my voice calm but firm. I'm applying for a divorce from James Chen. I also want to join the Northwest Development Program. The words felt like a vow, each syllable breaking a chain. Carter raised an eyebrow, scanning the document. Divorce is serious, Emily. And the Northwest? That's a hard life. Building roads, planting fields. You're sure? I'm sure, I said, meeting his gaze. My marriage is over. James has other priorities. The Northwest needs workers, and I need a purpose. I thought of the vision, the cosmic voice asking, will you let this be your end? I wouldn't. Carter nodded, his expression softening. You've always been dedicated. Your work at the factory proves it. This, he tapped the petition, is brave, and the Northwest could use someone like you. He stamped the petition, then pulled out a form for the development program. I'll file this today, he said, scribbling a note, and here's your train ticket to Xi'an tomorrow night. The central government's policies will support you there, housing, rations, a new start. I took the ticket, its edges crisp, a tangible promise of freedom. Thank you, Secretary Carter, I said, my voice thick with gratitude. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a wife or mother, but as Emily Zhao, a woman with worth. Back home, the house was awake, and the living room was filled with Lisa's chatter and James's laughter. They sat on the worn sofa, packages from yesterday's market scattered around, the pork's aroma lingering. Way sprawled on the floor, mimicking Lisa's English phrases, his eyes bright with adoration. I paused in the doorway, invisible to them, a ghost in my home. I'd have joined them in my past life, desperate to belong. I felt only a quiet detachment, like a glass wall separating us. James noticed me, his smile fading. Emily, where have you been? Lisa's leaving soon. Cook something special tonight. Lisa glanced up, her expression polite but distant, her new jeans a silent taunt. Way piped up, yeah, Mom, make it quick. Aunt Lisa's hungry. His tone was casual, but the dismissal stung, a reminder of his future scorn. I nodded, moving to the kitchen, but my mind was on the ticket in my bag, the Northwest's open skies. As I chopped onions, James followed, holding a small box. He said he got this for you in town, his tone unusually soft. He opened it, revealing a cream cake, half-eaten, the frosting smudged. Lisa saved some for you. I'd have accepted it in my past life, grateful for crumbs. I saw it for what it was, a discard, like me in their eyes. I shook my head, my voice steady. I'm not hungry. The cake landed on the counter with a soft thud, and Lisa's voice called from the living room. Emily, don't be upset. It's just a little treat. Her words dripped with false sweetness, but I didn't respond. Wei stormed in, glaring. You're so rude, Mom. Aunt Lisa's being nice, and you act like this? His anger, so familiar from the grave, no longer pierced me. Go back to Lisa, Wei, I said, turning to the stove. He huffed and left, but James lingered, his brow furrowed. What's wrong with you today? He asked, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Nothing, I said, stirring the pot. Just tired. Let him think me meek. The truth, my petition, my ticket, would stay hidden until I was gone. I packed the last of my things upstairs, the hairpin gleaming in the dim light. The Northwest waited, a place where my labor would matter, not be mocked. As Lisa's laughter rang out below, I closed the bag, my heart steady. The chains of my old life were breaking, and I was ready to step free. The Shanghai dusk settled like a bruise, the sky a smear of gray and orange above the cluttered rooftops. I stood in the kitchen, the divorce petition and train ticket to the Northwest tucked safely in my bag upstairs. Yesterday's resolve, filing with Secretary Carter, rejecting James's tainted cake, had hardened into a quiet certainty. The vision at James's grave, revealing Lisa's hold and Wei's scorn, had freed me from the illusion of family. Reborn in 1975, I was ready to leave, but James's latest gesture, a promise of a family dinner, delayed my escape. I sensed a trap, yet I went, hoping for a final moment of closure before boarding the train. James had been unusually kind that morning, his voice soft as he fed the chickens, a task he'd never touched in my past life. Let's do something special tonight, Emily, he'd said, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't read. Guilt, perhaps, or calculation. A candlelight dinner, like city folk, you, me, and Wei. I'd nodded, my heart guarded, knowing his kindness often hid motives. Lisa, lounging in the living room, had smiled thinly, her presence a constant reminder of my erasure. Wei, trailing her, had cheered, I want Aunt Lisa to come. I'd swallowed the sting, agreeing. One last meal, I told myself, then I'd be gone. The modest restaurant with paper lanterns and wooden tables was a short walk from home. I arrived early, my bag slung over my shoulder, the ticket a secret weight against my chest. The waiter lit a candle, its flame dancing in the dim light, and I sat, watching the door. Minutes turned to an hour, and the chair beside me was empty. The other diners, families laughing over steaming dishes, cast curious glances. My stomach twisted, not with hunger but with dread. James and Wei weren't coming. I paid for my untouched tea and left, the night air cold against my face. I wandered toward the village clinic, drawn by a need to clear my head before returning home. Voices spilled from an open window, familiar and sharp. I froze, peering through the gap. Lisa sat on a cot, her face alight with excitement, her hand on James's arm. James, we're having a baby, she said, her voice bubbling. 1 month along, the doctor says. James's eyes widened, then softened, a smile breaking through. A baby, he murmured, pulling her close. I'll keep it secret from Emily forever. My pay and allowance are all for you and the child now. Wei, perched nearby, clapped his hands. A baby brother. We'll be a real family, Dad. You, Aunt Lisa, and me. I don't want Mom anymore. His words, so gleeful, pierced me like shards of glass. In my past life, I'd ignored the signs, Lisa's visits, James's secrecy, hoping love would hold us together. The vision's truth was undeniable. They'd planned a life without me, built on my sacrifices. The cosmic voice from the grave whispered, "Will you let this be your end?" No, I wouldn't. I backed away, my breath shallow, and returned home, dark and silent. In the kitchen, I lit a single lamp and wrote a note, my hand steady despite the ache in my chest. "I've filed for divorce. Be happy." I left it on the table, a final severing of ties. Upstairs, I grabbed my bag, the ticket to Xi'an gleaming in the moonlight. The Northwest Development Program awaited, a place where my labor would matter, not be squandered on those who'd cast me aside. I slipped out, the door clicking shut behind me, and walked to the train station, the city's hum fading into the night. The platform was nearly empty, the train's whistle a low moan in the distance. I boarded, finding a seat by the window, my bag clutched tight. As the train lurched forward, Shanghai's lights blurred into streaks of color, each one a piece of my old life falling away. I thought of James, promising me a dinner he never meant to share, of Lisa, claiming a future with my money, of Wei, choosing her over me. In my past life, I'd have wept, begged for their love. Now I felt only clarity, the pain sharpening my resolve. The ticket in my hand was more than paper. It was a promise, a new beginning in the Northwest, where I'd build roads and fields, not dreams for others. The vision had given me this chance, and I'd seize it. As the train rumbled on, I leaned back, the stars visible through the window. The betrayal had broken my heart, but it hadn't broken me. I was Emily Zhao, reborn, and I was free. The train's rhythm faded as it slowed, the Xi'an station emerging through the dawn's pale mist. I stepped onto the platform, my cloth bag light on my shoulder, the Northwest's crisp air contrasting sharply with Shanghai's smog. Last night's betrayal, James's empty dinner promise, Lisa's pregnancy, Wei's gleeful rejection, still lingered, a dull ache beneath my resolve. The vision at James's grave, granting me rebirth in 1975, had led me to the land of my youth. The cosmic voice's challenge, "Will you let this be your end?" echoed as I walked toward my parents' village, each step reclaiming the life I'd lost. The path wound through fields of golden wheat, the mountains looming like silent guardians. I hadn't seen my parents in 7 years since I'd defied their warnings and followed James to Shanghai. My letters had dwindled, my savings spent on his family, leaving no coin for a ticket home. As the familiar mud brick house came into view, my throat tightened. The roof sagged, the walls weathered, but the sight of my mother's garden, rows of cabbage and herbs, brought tears. I knocked, my hand trembling, and the door creaked open. "Emily?" My mother's voice cracked, her gray hair framing a face etched with worry. My father appeared behind her, his eyes wide, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered. "Ma, Ba," I whispered, dropping to my knees. "I'm home." They pulled me into their arms, tears mixing with laughter. "You foolish girl," my mother sobbed. "You finally came back." My father's hand rested on my head, steady and warm. "We told you that boy was no good," he said, his voice gruff but soft. "But you're here now." Over tea, I told them of James's betrayal, the divorce, and my plan to join the Northwest Development Program. I spared them the vision and rebirth. It was too strange and raw. They listened, their faces a mix of anger and relief. "You're free now," my mother said, squeezing my hand. "Stay with us, build a life here." I nodded, the ache of Shanghai easing. In my past life, I'd died without seeing them, my loyalty to James a wall between us. Now reborn, I'd make it right. The next morning, I reported to the local administrative office, a bustling hub of workers and blueprints. Director Liu, a stout woman with a no-nonsense gaze, welcomed me. "Comrade Zhao, your factory experience is valuable," she said, handing me a work assignment. "We're building irrigation channels to turn dry land into fields. You'll lead a team." I took the papers, and my heart was swelling. This was the dream I'd buried for James, a chance to shape the land, not just survive it. Days blended into weeks. I led my team through dusty plains by sunrise, digging channels to carry river water to parched soil. The work was grueling, my hands blistered, my back aching, but each completed trench felt like a victory. Farmers cheered as water flowed, their fields greening under our care. At night, I pored over maps by lamplight, plotting routes for new roads to connect villages to markets. My team respected me, their nods and smiles a balm after years of Wei's scorn and James's dismissal. I was no longer the invisible wife. I was Emily Zhao, a builder, a leader. One evening, as I surveyed a new channel, a young woman from my team, May, clapped my shoulder. "You work harder than any man here, Comrade Zhao," she said, grinning. "The Northwest's lucky to have you." I laughed, the sound foreign but free. In Shanghai, my labor had been mocked. Here it was honored. I thought of Lisa's polished charm, Wei's cruel words at the grave. "You're nothing compared to Aunt Lisa." They'd never see this Emily, who turned dust into life. At home, my parents fussed, insisting I eat more, their love a quiet anchor. "You're thinner, darker," my mother chided, ladling soup into my bowl. But I'd never felt stronger. The Northwest was more than a refuge. It was a calling. In my past life, I'd wandered with a family that didn't want me. Now, reborn, I was planting roots in soil that welcomed my touch. As I lay in bed, the stars bright through the window, I felt a peace I hadn't known in decades. Shanghai was behind me, but the future, my future, was beginning. The northwest sun beat down on the dusty plain, its heat rippling over the half-finished irrigation channel. I knelt beside a trench, my hands caked with earth, checking the slope to ensure water would flow evenly to the fields. 2 months had passed since I'd arrived in Xi'an, leaving behind Shanghai's betrayal, James's lies, Lisa's pregnancy, Wei's rejection. The vision at James's grave, granting me rebirth in 1975, had brought me home to my parents and the Northwest Development Program. Here, building channels and roads, I'd found purpose. My labor no longer mocked, but celebrated. Yet, as I worked, a new presence began to soften the edges of my solitude. How? A fellow worker whose quiet kindness stirred something I wasn't ready to name. How approached, his silhouette sharp against the noon sky, a canteen in hand. "Comrade Zhao, you'll dry out if you don't drink," he said, his voice warm but teasing. I took the canteen, the water cool against my parched throat, and met his gaze. Hao was from my province, his broad face weathered by years in the fields, his eyes bright with a sincerity that reminded me of my father. Since my first day, he'd been a steady ally, hauling stones when my team struggled, sharing his lunch when I forgot mine. "Thanks, Hao," I said, handing back the canteen. "You're always looking out for me." He grinned, crouching beside me to inspect the trench. "Someone has to. You work harder than anyone here. Leading this team, mapping roads at night. When do you rest?" His tone was light, but his eyes held a question, a gentle concern that caught me off guard. In Shanghai, my efforts had been invisible, scorned by James and Wei. Here Hao saw me, not as a wife or mother, but as Emily, a woman carving a future from the earth. I brushed dirt from my hands, deflecting. "Rest is for when the fields are green." He laughed, the sound easy, like a breeze through wheat. "Fair enough, but you're holding up half the sky, Comrade Zhao. Don't forget that." The phrase, a nod to women's strength, warmed me, though I kept my expression neutral. In my past life, I'd poured my heart into James, only to be betrayed. The vision's cosmic voice, "Will you let this be your end?" had driven me to the Northwest, but love felt like a risk I couldn't take. Still, Hao's presence lingered, a quiet promise I couldn't entirely ignore. We worked side by side, reinforcing the channel's walls, and the team chattered a lively hum around us. My young teammate, May, called out, "Emily, this trench is perfect. The village will have water by spring." I smiled, pride swelling. The channel was my design, and its path was calculated to maximize flow. At night, I'd sketch road routes, linking remote villages to markets, my maps earning nods from Director Liu. This tangible, lasting work was my rebirth's reward, a stark contrast to Shanghai's endless servitude. As the sun dipped, Hao and I walked back to the work camp, the mountains glowing red in the distance. He carried my shovel, insisting despite my protests. "You've got enough on your shoulders," he said, his voice low. I glanced at him, his profile steady against the fading light. I might have blushed in another life, let his kindness pull me closer. But my heart, scarred by James's lies, held back. "You don't have to do that, Hao," I said, my tone softer than I meant. He stopped, turning to face me, his eyes earnest. "I know I don't, but I want to, Emily. You're incredible. Not just your work, but you." The way you keep going after everything. His words hung between us, heavy with meaning. I looked away, the memory of James's early promises, soft words, a steamed bun saved on a train, flashing through me. Those promises had crumbled, leaving me to beg for scraps. How was different, but I wasn't ready to trust again. I appreciate that, I said, my voice steady. But the Northwest is my focus now. There's too much to do. He nodded, his smile tinged with understanding, not defeat. I'll be here, Emily, whenever you're ready. He resumed walking, the shovel swinging lightly, and I followed, my heart a mix of caution and warmth. Howe's patience was a gift I'd consider when my wounds healed. At the camp, I joined my parents for dinner, their small house a haven of laughter and soup. You're glowing, girl, my mother said, her eyes sharp. Is it the work or that young man I saw you with? I laughed, shaking my head. Just the work, Ma. But as I lay in bed, the stars bright outside, I thought of Howe's grin, his steady hand. The Northwest had given me purpose, but Howe offered something more, a chance to believe in kindness again. For now, I'd build my channels, roads, and life. The rest could wait. The Northwest morning was crisp, the air sharp with the scent of pine and freshly turned earth. I stood at the edge of a new irrigation channel, my clipboard heavy with notes, the hum of my team's shovels a steady rhythm. 4 months had passed since I'd left Shanghai, the betrayal at the restaurant, James's empty promise, Lisa's pregnancy, Wei's rejection, now a scar, not a wound. The vision at James's grave, granting me rebirth in 1975, had led me to the Northwest Development Program, where I'd found purpose-building channels and roads. Howe's quiet kindness had sparked hope, but my focus remained on work, and my heart was cautious. Today, that peace was shattered. A shadow fell across the trench, and I saw James, his military jacket rumpled, his face gaunt. Wei stood beside him, thinner, his eyes red and watery. My stomach twisted, the past rushing back, James's cold commands, Wei's scorn at the grave. Emily, James said, his voice hoarse, we need to talk. His presence, once commanding, now seemed small against the vast Northwest plains. I straightened, my clipboard a shield. What are you doing here, Commander Chen? He flinched at the formal address, but pressed on. You ran off without a word, filed for divorce, and left our son. What kind of mother does that? His tone was accusatory, but his eyes betrayed panic. Wei tugged at his sleeve, his voice small. Mom, I'm hungry. Aunt Lisa doesn't cook. Please come home. The words stirred a flicker of guilt, but the vision's truth, Wei's future betrayal, choosing Lisa over me, held me firm. I set the clipboard down, my voice cold. We're divorced, James. You have no claim on me. And Wei, you wanted Lisa as your family. Go back to her. My team paused, sensing the tension, but I waved them on. James stepped closer, his hand reaching for mine. Emily, I was wrong. Lisa's not what I thought. Come home for Wei's sake. His touch, once a comfort, now made my skin crawl. I yanked my arm free. Please don't touch me. Wei's eyes welled up. Mom, don't you want me anymore? I haven't eaten properly since you left. His voice cracked, and momentarily I saw the boy I'd cradled, not the one who'd scorned me. But the cosmic voice from the grave echoed, Will you let this be your end? I wouldn't. Lisa's pregnant, isn't she? I said, my gaze shifting to James. She's the lady of your house now. Take care of her. James's face paled, his mouth opening, then closing. You know? I heard you at the clinic, I said. The memory sharp. Lisa's excited announcement, James's vow to hide it, Wei's cheer for a new family. You planned a life without me, using my money. I'm done. Wei sobbed, clinging to James, but I felt only clarity. In my past life, I'd have softened, returned for Wei's sake, only to die abandoned. Now, reborn, I chose myself. James's desperation turned to anger. You're throwing a tantrum, Emily. I'm a company commander. You can't just walk away. He stormed toward the administrative office, Wei trailing, and I followed, my heart pounding but steady. Inside, Director Liu sat at his desk, blueprints spread before him. James slammed a letter down. Comrade Liu, I request Emily's dismissal. She's neglecting her duties as a mother. Liu's eyes narrowed, and he glanced at me, his voice calm. Comrade Zhao, your response? I stepped forward, my voice unwavering. Director, I'm divorced from James Shen, as confirmed by Secretary Carter in Shanghai. I'm committed to the Northwest, leading my team to build channels that feed villages. My ex-husband has no authority here. Lou nodded, pulling out a satellite phone. Let's settle this. Minutes later, he hung up, his expression firm. Commander Chen and Secretary Xiao confirmed the divorce. Comrade Zhao is single and free to work here. You're interfering with state business. Leave or I'll call security. James shot up, his face ashen. That can't be, he stammered, the reality sinking in. Wei wailed, Mom, please. But I held my ground, my face cold. Go home, both of you. Don't make this worse. James grabbed Wei's arm, his voice trembling. Emily, when we married, you swore you'd stay forever. Don't you remember? I did. Our elopement, his gentle promises, the steamed bun he'd saved for me. But those memories were tainted by his betrayal, Lisa's shadow, and Wei's scorn. You broke that vow first, I said, turning away. I have work to do. As they stumbled out, Wei's cries fading, I returned to the trench, my team's shovels a grounding rhythm. The Northwest was my home now. No plea could pull me back. The Northwest dusk painted the sky in hues of amber and violet, the irrigation channel reflecting the fading light. I stood with my team, marking the day's progress, my clipboard filled with measurements for the next phase. 5 months had passed since I'd left Shanghai. The sting of James's betrayal, his secret with Lisa, Wei's rejection, now a distant echo. The vision at James's grave, granting me rebirth in 1975, had brought me to the Northwest Development Program, where I'd built a life of purpose. Howe's quiet support warmed me, but yesterday's confrontation with James and Wei, their desperate pleas rebuffed, reminded me how far I'd come. I thought the past was behind me until Lisa appeared. She stood at the camp's edge, her silhouette frail against the mountains, her city polish replaced by a worn floral jacket, identical to one I'd once owned. James and Wei flanked her, their faces taut with exhaustion. My team murmured, sensing trouble, but I waved them off, approaching alone. Lisa's eyes, once sharp with confidence, were red and swollen. Emily, she said, her voice breaking, I'm so sorry. Please come back. She dropped to her knees, tears streaming, a performance that might have swayed me in my past life. I crossed my arms, my voice steady. What do you want, Lisa? James stepped forward, his jaw tight. She's pregnant, Emily, but things are falling apart. I was wrong about her. We need you. Wei clung to his arm, his face pale. Mom, please, Aunt Lisa's not like you. The house is a mess. Their desperation was palpable, a mirror of the family I'd once fought to hold together. But the cosmic voice from the grave, will you let this be your end, kept me grounded. I wouldn't return to their chaos. Lisa sobbed, her hands clutching the dirt. I never meant to hurt you, Emily. I just wanted to help James and Wei. I'm nothing. A stray cat, a dog. Give me a corner to stay, and I'll be happy just seeing him. Her words were calculated, a plea for pity, but her eyes flickered with defiance. I saw her now, not as the glamorous rival, but as a woman chasing validation, her dreams of stardom traded for James's fleeting affection. In my past life, I'd have pitied her, taken her in. Now I saw the trap. James knelt beside her, his voice urgent. Lisa, don't do this. You're carrying our child. He turned to me, his eyes bloodshot. Emily, I see her greed now. She spends everything and demands more. I was expelled from the military for misconduct because of her. Please, come back, for Wei, for me. Wei nodded, tears spilling. Mom, I was wrong. I need you. Their words tugged at old wounds, but the vision's truth, James's lies, Wei's scorn at the grave, held me firm. I laughed, the sound cold and sharp. Do you want me to be your maid so you can live happily with Lisa's child? No, James. You chose this. Lisa's face paled, her sobs faltering. She rose, her voice shrill. If you can't tolerate me, I'll end it. Me and the baby. She lunged toward a low wall, her intent theatrical but dangerous. Wei screamed, Aunt Lisa, no! James scrambled to pull her back, wrapping her in his arms. Lisa, stop! We'll go back to Shanghai and figure it out. The scene was chaos, their voices a cacophony of blame and panic. In my past life, I'd have intervened, soothed their pain, sacrificed myself to fix them. Now I stood apart, the Northwest's vastness a reminder of my strength. I said, you're a family now, my voice cutting through their noise. Live with it. I turned to leave, but James grabbed my wrist, his grip desperate. Emily, please, I'll divorce her, make it right. I yanked free, my eyes blazing. You made your choices, James. So did Wei. I've built something here, channels that feed villages, roads that connect lives. I'm not your servant anymore. Wei sobbed, reaching for me, but I stepped back. Go home, I said, my tone final. Lisa collapsed against James, her cries fading into whimpers. They stumbled away, Wei's wails echoing in the dusk, but I felt no regret. The Northwest was my home, my work, my legacy. As I returned to the channel, May approached, her eyes wide. Comrade Zhao, are you okay? I nodded, picking up my clipboard, better than ever. The stars emerged, bright against the darkening sky, and I thought of Hao's smile, my parents' warmth. The vision had given me this chance, and I'd seized it. James and Lisa's fall was their own making, not mine. I was Emily Zhao, reborn, and I was free to build, not mend. The Northwest evening was fabulous, the administrative office's lantern casting a warm glow over my desk, where I sketched a new road route. 6 months had passed since I'd left Shanghai. The betrayal, James's secret with Lisa, Wei's rejection, now a faint shadow. The vision at James's grave, granting me rebirth in 1975, had led me to the Northwest Development Program, where I'd built irrigation channels and found purpose. Hao's steady kindness hinted at new possibilities, and Lisa's desperate plea last week, rebuffed with James and Wei, had solidified my freedom. But a phone call from Wei, his voice trembling, pulled me back. Mom, please come to Shanghai, he'd sobbed. I can't take it anymore. Despite his scorn at the grave, his words stirred a mother's instinct. I requested leave from Director Liu, who nodded, his eyes kind. Go, Comrade Zhao, but don't let them dim your light. I booked a train ticket, and the journey was a blur of mountains and memories. As Shanghai's smoggy skyline emerged, my heart tightened. I'd left as a broken wife. I returned as Emily Zhao, a builder, not a servant. At the village entrance, Wei ran toward me, his clothes ragged, his face gaunt. Mom, you came, he cried, throwing his arms around me. His thin frame shook, and I hugged him back, the boy I'd raised battling the one who'd chosen Lisa. What's wrong, Wei? I asked, my voice gentle but guarded. He pulled me toward the house, his words tumbling. Ever since you left, it's not been perfect. Aunt Lisa was mean, and Dad was always angry. The house was a shadow of itself, the walls streaked with grime, the air sour with neglect. Inside, Lisa's voice cut through the dimness, sharp and demanding. James, I need cod liver oil. All the pregnant women in the city take it. Don't you love me anymore? She stood on the porch, her floral jacket frayed, her pregnancy rounding her frame. Gone was the polished city girl. She looked worn, desperate. James, his face haggard, clenched his fists. I spent everything on your jeans, Lisa. I'm borrowing coupons to eat. Where am I supposed to find money? Lisa's eyes flashed. You're lying. You've been begging Secretary Zhao to reverse the divorce. You want Emily back. Her accusation hit like a spark, and I froze in the doorway, Wei's hand tight in mine. James's head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine, a flicker of shame crossing his face. Emily, he stammered, you're here. Lisa turned, her expression shifting from fury to feigned sweetness. Oh, Emily, thank goodness. We're a mess without you. I stepped inside, my voice cold. I came for Wei, not you. The truth spilled out in their silence. James's expulsion from the military for misconduct, their dwindling funds, Lisa's demands draining what little they had. Wei whispered, She doesn't cook, Mom. I'm hungry all the time. His eyes, once cruel at the grave, now held regret, a boy caught in the wreckage of his choices. In my past life, I'd have stayed and fixed their chaos. The cosmic voice echoed, Will you let this be your end? No, I wouldn't. James approached, his voice low. Emily, I was wrong. Lisa's not who I thought. Let's remarry for Wei's sake. I'll be good to you. Lisa scoffed, but her eyes betrayed fear, her hold on him slipping. Wei looked up, hopeful. Mom, please. Dad's sorry. Their pleas tugged at old wounds, but the Northwest, my channels, team, parents, anchored me. I knelt before Wei, my voice soft but firm. I love you, Wei. I always will, but I can't stay. You chose Lisa, and now you must grow strong and make your path. When you're ready, find me in the Northwest. Wei's tears fell, but he nodded, a spark of understanding in his eyes. I stood, facing James. You built this life, not me. Live with it. Lisa's face twisted, but she said nothing, her bravado crumbling. I turned to leave, Wei's hand slipping from mine. "I'll be okay, Mom," he whispered, his voice small but resolute. I smiled, pride mixing with sorrow. He was my son, and though I'd lost him to James's lies, I'd given him a chance to learn. Outside, Shanghai's noise swallowed the house's silence. I walked to the station, the train ticket back to Xi'an a beacon. In my past life, I'd died for a family that discarded me. Now, reborn, I'd given Wei love and boundaries, not servitude. The Northwest waited, my work, my parents, Hao's quiet smile. As the train pulled away, I leaned back, the city fading. I was Emily Zhao, not a wife or maid, but a woman who'd chosen her end, and it was only the beginning. The Northwest sky stretched wide, a canvas of stars above the administrative office, where I stepped out after a long day of planning road routes. The cool evening air carried the scent of earth and pine, a reminder of the life I'd built in the 7 months since leaving Shanghai. The vision at James's grave, granting me rebirth in 1975, had freed me from betrayal. James's lies, Lisa's hold, Wei's rejection. My return to Shanghai last week, answering Wei's plea, had closed that chapter with love and boundaries, not servitude. I found purpose in the Northwest Development Program, leading teams to build channels and roads. Hao's quiet support had grown into a steady warmth, and tonight he waited, ready to change everything. I spotted him by the office gate, pushing a bicycle, its frame glinting under the lantern's glow. His broad smile, familiar from months of shared work, hauling stones, sketching maps, eased the weight of my day. "Emily, thought you'd work all night," he teased, his voice light but his eyes earnest. I laughed, slinging my clipboard under my arm. "Someone's got to keep the roads on track, Hao." Once a cautious spark, his presence felt like home, contrasting with James's empty promises. He handed me the bicycle, his fingers brushing mine. "A gift," he said, his tone soft but deliberate. "For you." The gesture caught me off guard. The bike symbolized freedom, like the Northwest. In my past life, James's gifts, a fake gold bracelet, a half-eaten cake, had been insults. Hao's was different, given with respect, not pity. I shook my head, instinctively wary. "Hao, it's too much." He grinned, undeterred. "Nonsense. I've got bigger plans, a sewing machine, a TV, the whole proposal set. But this is a start." My breath hitched, his meaning clear. Months ago, I'd rebuffed his kindness, my heart scarred by James's betrayal, Lisa's shadow, Wei's scorn. The cosmic voice from the grave, "Will you let this be your end?" had driven me to build, not love. But Hao had waited, his support unwavering, sharing water during long shifts, praising my channel designs, listening when I spoke of my parents' pride. He saw me as Emily Zhao, not a wife or maid, but a woman who'd turned dust into fields. My caution softened, the Northwest's open sky urging me to trust again. "Hao," I said, my voice low, "you know what I've been through." He nodded, stepping closer, the bicycle between us. "I do. And I admire you, Emily, not just for your work, but your heart. You're strong, incredible. I like you more than I can say. Will you give me a chance?" His words were simple, but they carried a weight James's vows never had. I thought of Shanghai, Wei's regret, Lisa's demands, James's pleas, all left behind. The Northwest had rebuilt me, and Hao offered a future, not a chain. My heart pounded, a mix of fear and hope. I looked at the bicycle, then at Hao, his eyes steady, his smile patient. The vision had given me a second chance, not just to work, but to live. "Yes," I said, my voice clear, a smile breaking through. "I will, Hao." His face lit up, and he let out a whoop, lifting me off the ground, spinning me under the stars. I laughed, pounding his chest. "Please put me down. People are watching." But my heart soared, sweeter than honey, a joy I'd forgotten I could feel. He set me down, still grinning. He declared, "Emily's mine now," loud enough for the camp to hear. Workers nearby chuckled, their lanterns bobbing as they watched. I blushed, lowering my head, but Hao took my hand, his grip warm, grounding. "Let's ride," he said, gesturing to the bicycle. I climbed on, wobbly at first, his hand steadying the handlebars. We pedaled toward my parents' village, the night air rushing past, the stars a canopy above. For the first time, I wasn't running from pain, but toward something new. At home, my parents greeted us, their eyes twinkling at Hao's presence. About time, my mother muttered, ladling soup. Over dinner, Hao spoke of his dreams, farming, building with me, a life rooted in the Northwest. My father nodded, approving, and I felt a peace settle. Wei was learning from his choices in Shanghai, and I'd given him love, not my life. James and Lisa were their ruin. The Northwest, my parents, Hao, they were my future. As we left, Hao walked me to the gate, the bicycle at my side. "I'll wait as long as you need," he said, his voice soft. I squeezed his hand, my smile steady. "You won't have to wait long." I pedaled home, the wind carrying away the last of my past. I was Emily Zhao, reborn, not to beg for love, but to build it, on my terms, under a new dawn.